Cub trapped in a Ferris wheel gear, what this baby did was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The August night at Willowbrook Fair was thick with humidity and the smell of deep-fried everything. 12-year-old Isabella Chase checked her phone again. 8:47 p.m. Her parents had said to meet back at the funnel cake stand by 9, but Isabella had other plans. She slipped the phone into her pocket and wound deeper into the maze of rides and game booths. Near the base of the ancient Ferris wheel, the one they called the Pioneer because it had been at Willowbrook Fair since 1958, a 3-month-old black bear cub had wandered far from its den. The cub's mother had gone hunting, leaving strict instructions to stay hidden. But the carnival lights blinked like fireflies, and the air carried scents the cub had never experienced. Charlotte Bennett, only 6 years old, clutched her stuffed elephant as her family stopped to watch the ring toss game. Her older brother Ryan was showing off, trying to impress a group of teenagers. Charlotte's parents cheered him on, not noticing when she drifted toward the mechanical sounds that fascinated her. She pressed her small body against the safety fence surrounding the Ferris wheel's machinery, watching the gears turn beneath protective mesh screens. The cub crept closer, its nose twitching at the sugar-sweet air. Through a gap in the fence meant for maintenance access, it squeezed its body, drawn to investigate the grinding sounds. Its curiosity proved deadly. As the cub sniffed at the exposed gearing system, its left hind paw slipped between two massive, rotating discs. The metal teeth closed slowly but firmly around the tender paw. The cub's first cry was raw terror, a sound that seemed impossible from such a small creature. It echoed off the maintenance shed and bounced against the carousel music playing nearby. Most fairgoers didn't hear it, their attention captured by flashing lights and carnival barkers. Isabella heard it clearly. She froze mid-step between the duck pond game and the tilt-a-whirl. That wasn't a carnival sound, that was pain, real pain. She turned slowly, triangulating the source with her ears like her grandfather had taught her during their hunting trips. Charlotte heard it too. Her head snapped up from watching the gears. She knew that sound. 2 weeks ago, she'd found a baby raccoon caught in a drainage pipe. It had made the same noise, terrified, desperate, pleading. Charlotte scrambled closer to the mesh, pressing her face against the metal diamonds. "Hello?" she whispered. "Are you okay in there?" Through the gaps, she could see movement, black fur matted with grease and the glint of white teeth. The cub thrashed its head, trying to look at the source of the voice. Its paw was wedged at an impossible angle, twisted as the gear continued its slow but relentless rotation. Isabella arrived at the fence just as Charlotte pressed her tiny fingers through the mesh. "Whoa there," Isabella said, dropping to her knees. "What is it? What did you see?" Charlotte pointed into the shadows of the machinery. "There's an animal stuck. A baby, something. It hurts." Isabella leaned forward, squinting into the maintenance area. Her eyes adjusted to the dim light. When she saw the bear cub, her breath caught. Oh my God! The cub was in worse trouble than either girl could have imagined. Not only was its paw caught, but the continuous rotation was slowly crushing the bones. Already, the cub's paw hung at an unnatural angle, swelling visibly even in the low light. The fur was darkening, blood mixed with the thick grease coating the gears. "We have to tell someone," Isabella said, but her voice lacked conviction. The Ferris wheel operator's booth was empty. A handwritten sign read, "Back in 10 minutes." A glance at her phone showed it had been 8 minutes already. The cub whimpered again, softer this time. Its struggles were weakening. Charlotte reached through the fence again, her fingers stretching toward the trapped creature. "Don't give up," she said in the soothing voice she used with her dolls. Isabella grabbed Charlotte's arm. "Don't touch it. Wait." She scanned the area desperately. That's when she saw them. Glowing yellow eyes in the darkness beyond the fair's boundary lights. 2 eyes, then 4, then 2 again as they blinked. They were too high to belong to a dog, too steady to belong to a person with a flashlight. "Charlotte," Isabella said very quietly, "I think we're not alone." The 6-year-old followed Isabella's gaze. She saw the eyes, too. At her age, she hadn't yet learned to be afraid of bears, but she knew enough to be scared. "The mommy bear?" Isabella nodded. "She's watching us. Watching her baby." The cub seemed to sense the presence of its mother. It let out a weak cry, not of pain this time, but of recognition. The answering call from the woods was low and powerful. Every instinct in Isabella's body screamed to run, but Charlotte remained pressed against the fence. "We can't leave it here." Isabella looked at her phone. 8:52 p.m. The operator would be back any minute. Or would he? This was Willowbrook Fair, where 10 minutes often meant 20 or 30. The concession stands were busy tonight. The man might have stopped to chat with friends, grab a bite, or even stepped out for a smoke. The mother bear moved closer. Isabella could see her massive shape now, easily 400 pounds of muscle and maternal rage. The bear stayed in the shadows just beyond the fair's lights, but Isabella could sense her agitation. Every few seconds the cub would cry out, and the mother would respond with a deep grunt. "The wheel has to stop," Charlotte said, her small voice surprisingly firm. "We have to make it stop." Isabella looked at the emergency kill switch on the operator's panel. It was painted bright red, impossible to miss, but it was at least 30 feet away, requiring them to leave the fence and run across open ground, with a mother bear watching, with a crowd of people who would see them tampering with ride equipment. "If we stop the ride, people will get mad," Isabella reasoned out loud. "There are probably 20 people up there right now, paying money for their ride." "The cub's paw will be squished," Charlotte said simply. Isabella closed her eyes. She was 12 years old enough to understand consequences. If she hit that emergency stop, the Ferris wheel would jerk to a halt. People might get scared. There could be complaints, maybe even injuries if someone wasn't holding on tight. Her parents would be called. There would be questions, discipline, maybe worse. But if she didn't, "I'll do it," she said, standing up. Charlotte grabbed her hand. "I'll come with you." Together, they turned from the fence and walked quickly toward the operator's booth. Neither dared to look at the woods where the mother bear watched. They kept their eyes on the red button that could end the cub's suffering. They were halfway there when the first scream came from above. A rider had spotted something, perhaps the bear in the shadows, or maybe just sensed the strange energy that had settled over the area. The scream triggered others. Soon, several riders were pointing down at the woods, creating a commotion that drew even more attention. Isabella and Charlotte exchanged glances. The chaos might actually help them. Everyone was looking up, not down at 2 girls approaching the control panel. But the increased noise and movement had another effect. The mother bear stepped forward out of the shadows. In the carnival lights, she was massive, her fur rippling with each step. She didn't charge, not yet, but she was no longer hiding. The security guard assigned to this section of the fair finally noticed something was wrong. He spoke into his radio, then began jogging toward the Ferris wheel. His eyes were on the bear, not on 2 children who had just reached the operator's booth. "Now," Isabella whispered. Her hand hovered over the emergency stop button. That's when they heard it. A new sound that changed everything. Not a cub's cry or a bear's growl, but human voices. Lots of them. From the crowd. "There's a bear! Call animal control! Where are my kids?" The panic spread like fire through dry grass. Parents grabbed children. Teenagers pulled out phones to record. Security guards converged from all directions. In the confusion, no one noticed Isabella's hand slam down on the red button. The Ferris wheel's motor cut off immediately, and the giant structure groaned to a stop. Some passengers cursed. A few yelped in surprise. But Isabella and Charlotte were already running back to the fence. The cub had about 30 seconds, maybe less, before someone would restart the wheel or before the mother bear decided these children were threats rather than helpers. The trapped cub seemed to understand the sudden stillness. Its whimpers turned to what almost sounded like whines of relief. Charlotte pressed her face to the fence again. "We stopped it! We stopped the hurting!" Isabella was thinking faster. "We need tools, something to pry the gear apart." She looked around frantically. Every second counted. In the parking lot area, she spotted someone loading a toolkit into their truck. Probably a maintenance worker heading home. Without hesitation, she sprinted toward him. "Sir! SIR!" she yelled. "Emergency! There's an animal trapped in the Ferris wheel." The man, surprised by the urgency in a child's voice, stopped and turned. Isabella was already at his truck. "I need pliers, or a pry bar, please." Behind them, the situation at the Ferris wheel had escalated. The security guard was ordering everyone to evacuate the area. The mother bear had moved even closer, her massive form clearly visible now. People were screaming, pushing, creating a chaos that drew more bears from deeper in the woods. The man with the toolkit looked toward the commotion, then back at Isabella. "What the He caught himself, remembering he was talking to a child. "What's going on?" "There's a bear cub stuck in the machine." Isabella grabbed a pair of large pliers from his open toolbox. "I'm sorry, I have to borrow these." Before he could stop her, she was running back toward the Ferris wheel, clutching the borrowed tools. The maintenance worker followed, shouting after her to wait. Charlotte was still at the fence, trying to calm the cub with soft words. "It's okay, baby bear. My friend is coming. She'll help you." The mother bear was now less than 20 feet from the fence. Every security guard's attention was on her. No one was watching the gears where the real problem lay. Isabella reached Charlotte and pushed the pliers through the fence. "I don't know if these will fit." "They have to," Charlotte said fiercely. Isabella worked the pliers into the gap where the cub's paw was caught. The gear was frozen in place with the emergency stop engaged, which was both good and bad. Good, because it wasn't actively crushing the paw anymore. Bad, because it held the paw firmly in position. The cub whined, but seemed to understand they were trying to help. It stopped struggling and remained as still as possible. "I think I feel something give," Isabella said, sweat beading on her forehead from the effort. But the gear was massive, designed to hold the weight of a 40-foot Ferris wheel. Her 12-year-old arms weren't strong enough to pry it apart. "Let me try," Charlotte said. "You're too small." "Maybe I can reach at a different angle." Charlotte squeezed her tiny hands through the fence, adding her strength to Isabella's. Together they pulled and pried at the gear. Behind them, a voice boomed through a megaphone. "Everyone evacuate the Ferris wheel area. There is a bear situation. Please move to your vehicles in an orderly fashion." But neither girl moved. They couldn't leave now. The mother bear, perhaps sensing that the crowd was thinning and her opportunity was coming, let out a roar that shook the air. It was a warning and a promise combined. "Girls!" The maintenance worker had reached them. "You need to get out of here. That bear could—" He stopped when he saw what they were doing. Through the fence, he could see the trapped cub. His face changed from anger to understanding to determination. "Move aside," he said firmly. Isabella and Charlotte stepped back as the man crouched down. He was bigger, stronger. He worked his large pliers into the gear and threw his full weight into levering it open. The gear moved. Just a fraction, but enough. The cub pulled its paw free with one last cry that was more relief than pain. Immediately, the cub scrambled away from the machinery, favoring its injured paw. It pressed itself against the far side of the enclosure, away from the people but also away from the crushing gears. "Now what?" the maintenance worker asked quietly. "There's a mother bear 50 feet away, and her cub can't escape through the fence." The enclosure had been designed to keep people out, not animals in. The mesh was tight enough to prevent fingers from entering, which meant it also prevented paws from exiting. They had saved the cub from being crushed, but now it was trapped in a cage with its terrified mother watching. And the mother was done waiting. She charged. The first thing that hit them was the sound. Not a roar exactly, but a massive rush of air and power. Isabella saw her coming and instinctively pushed Charlotte behind her. The maintenance worker stepped in front of both girls. The bear slammed into the fence with a force that shook the entire structure. The mesh held, but barely. She stood up on her hind legs, towering at least 7 feet tall, and swung her massive paws at the fence. Each impact rang like thunder. Security guards were shouting, pointing weapons that fired rubber bullets or tranquilizer darts. But they couldn't get a clear shot. The mother bear was too close to the operation equipment, and any projectile that missed could hit civilians or damage the Ferris wheel's controls. "The gate!" Charlotte suddenly shouted. "There's a maintenance gate." Isabella looked where Charlotte pointed. Sure enough, there was a small access door in the fence, secured with a simple slide bolt. It was designed for workers to enter the machinery area quickly. "If we open it, the cub can escape," Isabella said. "But the mother might—" "We have to try," the maintenance worker said. He was already reaching for the bolt. The mother bear seemed to understand what was happening. She dropped back to all fours and moved toward the gate area. Every instinct told Isabella to run, but she stayed put. They had started this rescue, and they were going to finish it. The bolt stuck. Years of dirt and rust had sealed it shut. The maintenance worker swore under his breath and tugged harder. "Here," Isabella said, grabbing the pliers she'd used on the gear. "Tap it loose with these." Together, they worked on the rusted bolt while a 300-pound bear waited impatiently just feet away. Each metallic tap seemed impossibly loud in the strange bubble of tension that had formed around them. Click. The bolt finally gave way. "When I open this gate," the maintenance worker said, looking directly at the girls, "you run. Understand? You run, and you get somewhere safe." Isabella nodded, grabbing Charlotte's hand. The man reached for the gate handle. Behind the mesh, the cub had limped closer, sensing escape. The mother bear was so close now that they could smell her, wild and raw and powerful. 1, 2, 3. He yanked the gate open. The cub darted out immediately, nearly tripping in its hurry. The mother bear was there to meet it, nuzzling it protectively while simultaneously putting herself between her baby and the humans. "Run!" Isabella shouted, and she and Charlotte sprinted away from the fence. The maintenance worker followed, but not before securing the gate behind him, preventing the bears from entering the main fair area. They made it 20 feet before stopping to look back. The mother bear had gathered her cub close, checking the injured paw. The cub whimpered, but the sound was different now, relief rather than agony. The bear family didn't linger. With one last look at the 3 humans who had helped, The mother led her cub back toward the woods. They disappeared between the trees, leaving behind a fair in chaos and 3 people forever changed. Security guards swarmed around Isabella, Charlotte, and the maintenance worker, asking questions, trying to understand what had happened. Parents rushed forward to reclaim their children. The fair manager arrived, red-faced and shouting about unauthorized emergency stops and safety protocols. But through all the noise and confusion, Isabella and Charlotte kept their hands clasped tightly together. They had seen something tonight that most people never witness, the moment when human compassion and wild instinct found common ground. As the police took statements and the crowds dispersed, Isabella's parents finally found her. Their relief at seeing her safe quickly turned to shock as they learned what had happened. "You could have been killed," her mother said, voice trembling. "You put yourself in terrible danger." "I couldn't let it die," Isabella said simply. Charlotte's family arrived moments later, her brother Ryan now quiet and serious. He had missed all the excitement while showing off at the ring toss. The maintenance worker, his name was Harold Thompson, they learned, spoke up for the girls. These kids saved that cub's life, and they did it without hesitation. They showed more courage than some grown men I know. The police officer taking statements paused. "Girls, what you did was dangerous, but it was also brave. Very brave." As the night wound down and statements were completed, the fair manager approached the families. "Your daughters are banned from the fair," he started. Then he paused, looking at the girls. They stood straight despite their fatigue, still holding each other's hands. "Actually," he amended, "they're banned from paying admission. For life. Anyone who would risk themselves to save an animal has free rides for life." It would be morning before they learned about Charlotte's broken arm, sustained when the mother bear first hit the fence. She had never mentioned the pain. First responders treated the injury carefully at the scene. It would be a week before they discovered that the cub had a crushed paw that would never heal properly. Wildlife officials tracked it through the woods and found it adapting to run on 3 legs, its mother fiercely protective, but allowing it to strengthen its weakness into a new kind of strength. Chapter 2. The Investigation. 2 days after the incident, Detective Maria Rodriguez arrived at the Willowbrook Fair with a different mission than crowd control. She wasn't investigating the bear encounter. That had been thoroughly documented. She was there because someone had anonymously reported suspicious activity around the Ferris wheel days before the incident. The tip had come through the department's website. Kids have been sneaking into the maintenance areas after hours. They've figured out how to unlock the service panels. Something bad is going to happen. Maria had initially dismissed it as a prank, but now, standing in the maintenance area where 2 children had just saved a bear cub, she wondered if there was more to the story. Harold Thompson returned to his regular maintenance duties that morning, but his mind kept drifting to the night before. As he inspected the gear where the cub had been trapped, he noticed something unusual. The protective mesh screen had been cut. Not torn or damaged by the bear, but cleanly cut with wire cutters. The cuts were old, covered with rust and dirt, suggesting they'd been there for weeks, maybe months. "Hey, Pete," Harold called to his fellow maintenance worker. "Come look at this." Pete Jenkins approached, coffee mug still steaming in the morning air. He peered at the fence where Harold pointed. "What am I looking at?" "Those cuts. See how precise they are? Someone's been getting into this area." Pete shrugged. "Maybe teenagers. You know how kids are. Always trying to get close to the rides." But Harold wasn't convinced. The cuts were too careful, too planned. This wasn't teenage mischief. This was someone who knew exactly what they were doing and had a specific purpose. Meanwhile, across town, Isabella Chase sat in her bedroom, staring at her laptop screen. She had spent the morning researching bear behavior, trying to understand why the cub had wandered so far from the forest. Her search led her to local news articles from the past month. Article after article mentioned the same thing: unusual bear sightings in residential areas. Food sources in the forest were scarce this season due to an unexplained blight affecting berry bushes and acorn trees. The bears were getting desperate, coming closer to human settlements than ever before. But what caught Isabella's attention was a pattern she noticed. All the sightings were in a specific area of town, the east side, where the old lumber mill used to operate. The mill had been shut down for 15 years, supposedly due to environmental concerns. But some of the more recent articles mentioned strange chemical odors coming from the abandoned property. Isabella's heart raced as she connected the dots. If something at the old mill was destroying the bears' food sources, they would be forced to seek other options. The fair, with its abundance of food waste and concentrated activity, would naturally attract them. Detective Rodriguez's investigation took an interesting turn when she examined the Ferris wheel's maintenance logs. The last official inspection had been 3 months ago, but someone had been accessing the machine regularly since then. The service panel lock showed signs of being repeatedly jimmied. When she asked the fair manager about it, his face turned pale. "We've been having some financial troubles," he admitted. "We've been skipping some of the monthly maintenance checks to save money, but I didn't know someone was breaking in." "What kind of work was being done?" Rodriguez pressed. "I don't know. The logs weren't being updated. But the rides seemed to be running fine, so I didn't." He trailed off, realizing how negligent he sounded. That afternoon, Charlotte Bennett returned to school for the first time since the incident. Her classmates had already heard about her adventure, but the story had grown in the telling. By the time she arrived, she was being treated as a celebrity. Teachers pulled her aside asking for details. The principal called her parents to arrange a special assembly where Charlotte could share her experience about wildlife safety. But Charlotte was distracted. During art class, as she painted a picture of the bear cub, she overheard 2 older students talking in the hallway. "My brother works part-time at the fair," one said. "He told me something weird's been happening with the maintenance guy, Harold Thompson. He's been staying late after closing, working on rides that aren't broken." "Why would he do that?" "Don't know. My brother says he seems worried about something. Always checking his phone, looking over his shoulder." Charlotte's hand tightened on her paintbrush. Harold had helped save the cub, but what if he knew more about the situation than he let on? Isabella's research took her deeper into the environmental issues affecting the local ecosystem. She found EPA reports about the lumber mill that had been filed but never investigated. The mill's closure had been sudden. One day it was operating normally. The next day it was shut down with a government order citing chemical concerns. But the interesting part was what wasn't in the reports. The specific chemicals weren't listed. The company that owned the mill was never named. And most suspicious of all, the land had been purchased by an anonymous buyer just days before the closure, suggesting someone had advance knowledge. A knock at her bedroom door interrupted her research. Her mother peered in. "Isabella, there's someone here to see you, a Detective Rodriguez." Down the hall, Isabella found the detective sitting in their living room. Rodriguez stood when Isabella entered, extending her hand professionally. "I'm investigating the bear incident," Rodriguez explained. "I need to ask you some questions about what you observed that night." Isabella had already given a statement to the police, but she answered Rodriguez's questions again. This time, however, the detective seemed interested in different details. "You mentioned the cub seemed confused before it got trapped," Rodriguez said. "Can you elaborate on that?" Isabella thought back. It kept circling the same area, like it was looking for something or someone, and it wasn't afraid of the lights and noise like I'd expect a wild animal to be. As if it had been near the fair before. Maybe or maybe. Isabella hesitated. Maybe what? Maybe it was following a scent. Bears have amazing noses, right? If someone had been feeding it or leaving food waste around. Rodriguez nodded slowly. Did you notice anything else unusual about the maintenance area where the cub was trapped? The mesh had holes cut in it, Isabella said immediately. I noticed when I was using the pliers. The cuts were clean, not torn. You're very observant. I want to be a veterinarian someday. I notice things about animals. After Rodriguez left, Isabella felt unsettled. The detective's question suggested she suspected something beyond a simple wildlife encounter. Isabella opened her laptop again and continued her research with renewed urgency. That evening, Harold Thompson met with his sister at a diner on the edge of town. She was crying when he arrived. I don't know what to do, Harry, she said. If this gets out, if people find out. Find out what? About Dad's work at the mill, about what he did. Harold's blood ran cold. The mill closed 15 years ago. Dad's been dead for 10. But the chemicals are still there, in the ground, in the water table, and they're spreading. Harold leaned back in his chair, suddenly understanding why his sister had called him in such distress. That's why the bears are coming down from the mountain. Their food sources are being contaminated, and it's not just the bears, other wildlife too. We've been tracking it for months, but the government won't do anything because officially the contamination never happened. Who's we? A group of environmental scientists. We've been testing the soil and water illegally. We have proof, but no platform. No one will listen to us. Harold rubbed his face with his hands. And the fair? The fair sits right over an old aquifer that's been contaminated. The animals can smell it. They're attracted to the area because they're confused, sick, desperate. That cub last night, it probably has toxins in its system that affected its natural fear response. Jesus, Sarah, why didn't you tell me this before? Because I knew you'd feel responsible. Dad worked there. He knew about the chemical dumping. He never said anything. I save animals at the fair equipment, Harold said quietly, and our father helped poison them. The pieces were falling into place for Harold, but he didn't know what to do with the information. Meanwhile, across town, Isabella was making her own discoveries. She had found old newspaper articles about environmental activists who had protested the lumber mill before its closure. One activist, Dr. Richard Molina, had been particularly vocal. A quick search revealed Dr. Molina still lived in Willowbrook, working as a chemistry professor at the community college. Isabella made a decision. If adults weren't investigating this properly, maybe someone needed to give them a push. The next morning, Isabella skipped her usual Saturday cartoons and rode her bike to the community college. She found Dr. Molina in his office, grading papers. I need to know about the old lumber mill, she said without preamble when he answered her knock. Dr. Molina looked up, surprised to see a 12-year-old in his office. I'm sorry, can I help you? I'm Isabella Chase. I helped save the bear cub at the fair. I think the cub got trapped because of something wrong with the environment. Something connected to the mill. The professor's expression changed. He set down his papers and really looked at Isabella. You're quite perceptive for your age. What makes you think that? I've been reading the news articles, the environmental reports, and they all point to the mill. But nobody seems to be doing anything about it. Dr. Molina sighed. Come in, close the door. For the next hour, Dr. Molina explained everything he knew about the lumber mill, the chemical dumping, and the ongoing environmental crisis that the local government refused to acknowledge. He showed her his research, his chemical analysis reports, and photographs of affected wildlife. The chemicals they dumped are persistent organic pollutants, he explained. They don't break down naturally, they accumulate in the food chain. When bears eat fish or berries contaminated with these chemicals, they become neurologically affected. Their behavior changes. They lose their natural fear of humans. So the cub getting trapped wasn't an accident. It was a symptom of a much larger problem, and it won't be the last incident unless something is done. Meanwhile, Detective Rodriguez had discovered something troubling in her investigation. The cut fence at the Ferris wheel wasn't the only modified equipment at the fair. A discreet inspection revealed that several rides had been tampered with, not to cause damage, but to create access points. Someone had systematically mapped out entry routes throughout the fair. When she pressed Harold Thompson further, he finally broke. "I've been helping my sister," he confessed. "She's part of a group trying to document the environmental damage from the old mill. We thought if we could prove that contaminated waste was affecting the groundwater under the fair, someone would have to pay attention." "So, you were collecting samples?" "Yes. Water samples, soil samples. The fair sits right on top of a major contamination plume. We needed to document it." "And the cut fences?" "That was my doing. I needed access to collect samples without raising suspicion. I've been working here for years. I know all the blind spots in security." Rodriguez nodded slowly. "Mr. Thompson, I think you need to meet with the district attorney. There are bigger issues at play here than fairground trespassing." The investigation exploded into something far larger than anyone anticipated. Rodriguez's findings, combined with Harold's confession and the scientific evidence gathered by his sister's group, forced local authorities to finally acknowledge the environmental disaster they had ignored for decades. EPA investigators arrived in Willowbrook within days. The lumber mill property was cordoned off for immediate testing. Emergency funds were allocated for wildlife protection and relocation. But the story that captured national attention was the role played by two children, a 12-year-old girl and a 6-year-old girl, who had unwittingly become the catalysts for uncovering a major environmental crime. Isabella and Charlotte were invited to a press conference where state officials announced the beginning of a major cleanup operation. Standing before cameras and reporters, Isabella spoke with a clarity that surprised the adults around her. "We didn't know about the chemicals or the politics," she said. "We just knew an animal needed help. Sometimes doing the right thing leads to bigger changes than you expect." Charlotte, her arm still in a sling, added simply, "The baby bear was hurting. We had to help." The press conference marked the beginning of Phase 2 of their involvement in the crisis. Environmental groups began reaching out, asking the girls to be youth ambassadors for wildlife protection. Schools requested them as speakers. Documentary filmmakers wanted to tell their story. But for Isabella and Charlotte, the most important development was permission to visit the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center where the bear cub was recovering. Dr. James Martinez, the lead veterinarian, met them at the center. "The cub has adapted remarkably well to its injured paw," he reported as he led them to the observation area. "We've named him Ferris, after where you found him." Through the glass, they watched as Ferris played with other recovering animals. His mother had been relocated to a protected sanctuary with cleaner territory, but Ferris would stay at the center until fully grown. "His paw will never be normal," Dr. Martinez explained. "But he's learning to use it differently. Bears are remarkably adaptable." Isabella pressed her hand against the glass. "Will he remember us?" "Bears have excellent memories. They remember both positive and negative experiences. I believe he'll carry the memory of your kindness with him for life." As they watched Ferris play, Charlotte spoke softly. "Do you think we changed anything?" "Really changed anything?" Dr. Martinez knelt beside her. "You changed everything. Before that night, everyone was ignoring a problem that was hurting animals every day. Now, people are paying attention. Now, things are going to get better." Isabella felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to find a reporter and cameraman entering the observation area with permission to film. "Isabella Chase and Charlotte Bennett," the reporter said warmly. "The young heroes of Willowbrook. Would you be willing to answer a few questions about your experience?" Before they could respond, Dr. Martinez stepped forward. "Actually, they're here as my guests today. Could this wait until they've had their full visit?" The reporter looked disappointed but nodded. Isabella felt grateful for the protection, but something nagged at her. The media attention was becoming overwhelming. Every day brought new requests for interviews, appearances, statements. That evening, after returning home, Isabella found herself unable to sleep. She kept thinking about Ferris, about the larger environmental crisis, about the weight of suddenly being thrust into the public eye. Her bedside lamp was still on when she got a late-night phone call. Her mother answered, talking quietly before knocking on Isabella's door. "Sweetheart, it's Detective Rodriguez. She says it's important." Isabella took the phone with trembling hands. What if they'd discovered something worse about the mill? What if more animals were in danger? "Isabella, I need to tell you something," Rodriguez said gently. "We've been monitoring communications related to the fair incident. There have been some threats." "Threats?" Isabella's voice was barely a whisper. "Nothing specific against you or Charlotte. But the lumber company that owned the mill, they're facing massive lawsuits now. They're trying to discredit the environmental findings. They've been putting pressure on people to change their stories. What does that mean for us? It means we want to put some protections in place, just as a precaution. A security detail for you and Charlotte. And we'd like both families to consider relocation assistance if things escalate." Isabella felt her world tilting. One moment of compassion for a trapped animal had spiraled into an environmental crisis, media attention, and now potential threats against their safety. "We'll be okay," she said, trying to sound brave. "We did the right thing." "You absolutely did," Rodriguez assured her. "But sometimes doing the right thing makes powerful people very angry. I just want you to be safe." After the call ended, Isabella sat in her dark room, processing this new layer of complexity. Outside her window, she could see the lights of downtown Willowbrook. Somewhere in the darkness beyond, Ferris was likely sleeping in his recovery enclosure. The mother bear was establishing a new territory. The contaminated mill sat silent and deadly, and somehow, Isabella and Charlotte had become the unlikely heroes in a story that was still unfolding, with consequences none of them could have imagined when they first heard a cub's cry for help. The investigation into the lumber mill's environmental crimes would take months. The cleanup would take years. The impact on the community would last generations. But it all started with two children who refused to ignore the sound of suffering. As Isabella finally drifted to sleep, she made a decision. Whatever came next, whatever challenges they faced, she would continue to speak up for those who couldn't speak for themselves. That's what Ferris had taught her, that even the smallest voice raised in compassion could change the world. But she had no idea that tomorrow would bring the first true test of that resolve, and a revelation that would shake everything she thought she knew about that night at the fair. The manila envelope appeared on Isabella's doorstep the next morning. No postage, no return address, just her name written in careful block letters. Inside were photographs. Dozens of them. Pictures of Isabella and Charlotte at the Ferris wheel. Pictures of the bear cub trapped in the gears. but also pictures they hadn't known existed. Someone had been photographing them from the shadows that entire night. The last photograph made Isabella's blood run cold. It showed a man standing near the woods, watching the bear rescue unfold. A man she recognized from her research. A man who hadn't been at the fair that night, at least not officially. Thomas Whitmore, the former CEO of Whitmore Lumber Company. The man who had closed the mill for environmental reasons 15 years ago, only to secretly sell the contaminated land to an anonymous buyer, he later turned out to own himself through a shell company. The message was clear. He had been there that night, watching, knowing exactly what would happen when those desperate bears, driven by his contamination, encountered curious children at a county fair. Isabella grabbed the phone with shaking hands. She needed to tell Detective Rodriguez. But as she dialed, she couldn't help wondering, had the entire encounter with Ferris been orchestrated? Had someone wanted those children to discover the bear crisis in the most dramatic way possible? And if so, why? The phone rang 3 times before Detective Rodriguez picked up. Her voice was alert despite the early hour. "Isabella? What's wrong?" "I got an envelope with pictures. Someone was taking photos the night we saved Ferris." "Stay calm. Is your mother there?" "Yes, she's in the kitchen making breakfast." "Don't touch the envelope or photos anymore. I'm sending an officer to collect them. And Isabella, pack a bag. You and your family need to stay somewhere safe for a few days." 2 hours later, Isabella, her parents, and Charlotte's family were being escorted to a secure hotel on the edge of town. The police had taken the mysterious envelope for forensic analysis, but Isabella had one photograph hidden in her pocket, the one showing Thomas Whitmore at the fair. She studied it repeatedly in the hotel room while her parents talked with Detective Rodriguez. The photograph haunted her. The timestamp showed 8:35 p.m., 13 minutes before Ferris got trapped. In the image, Whitmore stood near the edge of the woods, speaking on a cell phone. His body language suggested agitation, perhaps anger. Behind him, partially hidden in shadows, was another figure that Isabella hadn't noticed at first. She squinted at the image, wishing she had her magnifying glass. The second person was smaller, wearing what looked like maintenance coveralls. Could it be Harold Thompson? No, the timing didn't add up. Harold had said he was on the other side of the fair when the incident started. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Charlotte peered around the adjoining door. "My mom says I can come visit," Charlotte said, holding up a coloring book and crayons. Isabella quickly slipped the photo under her pillow. "Come in. Want to draw?" As Charlotte spread her coloring supplies on the bed, she spoke quietly. "I heard my parents talking. They're scared." "Me too." "Do you think someone wanted Ferris to get hurt?" Isabella paused, crayon hovering over paper. "I don't know. But I think someone knew it might happen." Meanwhile, across town, Detective Rodriguez was having a heated discussion with Chief of Police Margaret O'Brien. "We need more resources," Rodriguez insisted. "These kids stumbled onto something bigger than a wildlife incident. There's evidence of corporate espionage, environmental crime, possibly attempted murder if someone orchestrated that bear encounter." "Attempted murder is a stretch, Maria. We have no evidence anyone intended to harm those children. But the photographs suggest surveillance, planning, and now there are photographs being delivered to a 12-year-old's doorstep. This isn't coincidence." Chief O'Brien sighed heavily. "The mayor called this morning. The pressure from Whitmore Enterprises is immense. They're threatening lawsuits claiming we're conducting a witch hunt based on hearsay and amateur environmental theories. Since when do we let corporate pressure dictate our investigations? since they own half the town's infrastructure and employ a quarter of our population through various subsidiaries. We need to be careful here, Maria." That evening, as families gathered for a subdued dinner in the hotel restaurant, a new development emerged. Dr. Molina appeared at their table, looking disheveled and excited. "I apologize for interrupting," he said, "but I think you should see this." He held out his tablet, showing a news website. The headline read, "Anonymous Whistleblower Releases Whitmore Environmental Data." "What is it?" Isabella's father asked. "Someone just dumped 15 years of internal Whitmore company documents online. Chemical test results, email chains, financial records. The evidence is overwhelming. They knew about the contamination. They knew bears were being affected, and they've been paying officials to keep it quiet." Isabella felt a chill run down her spine. Someone was helping them, but who, and at what cost? "There's more, Doctor," Molina continued. "The person who released this information included a personal message. To the two young heroes who refuse to ignore suffering, the truth will set us all free. Stay strong, watch carefully. The real villain hasn't revealed themselves yet." That night, Isabella couldn't sleep. She kept turning the cryptic message over in her mind. If Thomas Whitmore wasn't the real villain, then who was? And why would someone orchestrate a bear cub's injury to bring attention to environmental crimes? Her phone buzzed quietly on the nightstand. A text from an unknown number. "Meet me at the old sawmill office tomorrow. 3 p.m. Come alone. Trust me. Sarah Thompson." Isabella stared at the message. Sarah Thompson was Harold's sister, the environmental scientist he'd mentioned. But why would she ask Isabella to come alone? Every instinct told her to show the message to her parents or Detective Rodriguez. But something else, curiosity, courage, foolishness, made her hesitate. She deleted the message and pretended to sleep when her mother checked on her. The next day, Isabella used every excuse in her arsenal. She volunteered to get ice from the machine. She asked to go to the hotel gift shop for a magazine. She told her parents she wanted to draw alone on the veranda. Instead, she slipped out the side entrance where she'd seen a taxi dropping off guests. Using her birthday money, she paid for a ride to the edge of town where the old sawmill once stood. The building was a skeleton of its former self. Windows were broken, weeds grew through cracks in the foundation, and warning signs declared the property condemned. Isabella almost turned back. Then she saw a woman standing in the shadow of the office entrance. Sarah Thompson looked nothing like her brother Harold. She was petite, with graying hair pulled back in a severe bun. Dark circles under her eyes suggested sleepless nights. "You came alone. Good." "I shouldn't be here," Isabella said, her voice shaking. "If my parents knew, your parents should know, everyone should know, but first you need to understand what you've really uncovered." Sarah led Isabella through the abandoned office. Dust motes danced in beams of afternoon sunlight. Old filing cabinets stood open, emptied long ago. But in a hidden room behind a false wall, Sarah had created a makeshift laboratory. Charts covered the walls, chemical formulas, maps with colored pins, photographs of sick and deformed wildlife. "The truth is worse than anyone imagined," Sarah began. "Whitmore Lumber didn't just dump chemicals illegally. They created new compounds, experimental pesticides and preservatives. They used this mill as a testing ground." Isabella studied the charts. Testing for what? Super pesticides, chemicals that could make lumber immune to termites and rot for decades. But these compounds had side effects. They accumulated in the food chain. They affected neural pathways in mammals. "The bears," Isabella whispered. and more. Deer, raccoons, smaller game, but bears are the apex predators. The chemicals concentrate in their systems. They lose fear. They become confused. They seek out human areas searching for food or relief from the constant nerve pain. Isabella felt sick. So, Ferris didn't just wander to the fair. Ferris was attracted by the chemical signature in the groundwater. The fair sits directly over one of the largest contamination plumes. The Ferris wheel machinery is old, develops leaks. The oil mixed with groundwater creates a specific scent profile that's actually attractive to chemically affected bears. How long have you known this? For years. My father worked here. He knew what they were doing, but was threatened into silence. When he died, I inherited his shame and his evidence. I've been trying to expose this for a decade. Isabella sank onto a stool. But why bring me here? Why not go to the police? Because you were there. You saw everything unfold naturally. No one can claim you were planted. No one can say your story was manufactured. You and Charlotte are our witnesses, untainted by corporate money or political pressure. The photographs, Isabella realized. Someone gave you those photographs. Sarah nodded. There are good people still inside Whitmore's organization. People who've been gathering evidence. The bear incident gave them the cover they needed to start releasing information. Who sent me the photos? Someone who wants Whitmore destroyed from within. Someone who's arranged things very carefully. Sarah's voice became urgent. But that's not why I called you here alone. There's something else. Something I couldn't tell in front of your parents or the police. She pulled out a manila folder. Inside was a birth certificate, yellowed with age. Thomas Whitmore had a daughter. His wife died in childbirth. The daughter was put up for adoption. Closed adoption, no public records. Isabella didn't understand the relevance. Okay? The adoption agency was here in Willowbrook, and the adoption was finalized just 6 weeks after the lumber mill officially opened, before any contamination could be detected. What are you saying? I'm saying Thomas Whitmore knew his chemicals would hurt people. He protected his own child by sending her away, but he let everyone else in this town risk exposure. A cold realization crept over Isabella. So there's someone here in town, someone who doesn't know they're Whitmore's daughter, someone who might have very different motivations than we think, someone who might be helping us or might be preparing for something worse. Outside, the sound of car tires on gravel interrupted them. Sarah cursed under her breath. Did you tell anyone you were coming here? No, Quick, hide in the file room. Don't come out until I give the all clear. Isabella scrambled into the small room Sarah indicated. Through a gap in the door, she watched as 2 men entered the office. Her heart stopped when she recognized one of them, the mysterious figure from the background of her photo. The man wore the same maintenance coveralls, but up close, he wasn't Harold Thompson. He was younger, leaner, with eyes that darted nervously around the space. Sarah, he hissed, you said you'd wait until tomorrow to meet her. She was ready now, and she deserves the truth. She deserves to be kept safe. Everything we've worked for could fall apart if she's linked to us. Who is she? Isabella wondered silently. Was this the mysterious whistleblower? The conversation continued but dropped to whispers Isabella couldn't make out. After what felt like hours, but was probably minutes, she heard footsteps leaving the building. Sarah returned to the file room. You can come out. They're gone. Who was that? My nephew, and yes, before you ask, he was at the fair that night. He's been documenting Whitmore's activities for years. Isabella's mind raced with implications. Is he the one who took the photos? Who's been helping me and Charlotte? He's been watching, yes. protecting you, making sure the right people see what's happening. But he's not our only ally. There's a network of people who want to bring Whitmore down. Plant workers, scientists, even some government officials who've been blocked from investigating properly. And someone in that network is Whitmore's daughter? Sarah hesitated. We believe so. We just don't know who. The afternoon was fading when Sarah finally offered to drive Isabella back to the hotel. On the way, she shared more details about the environmental crimes, the cover-up, and the various factions now positioning themselves for the coming battle. You've become a symbol, Sarah explained. You and Charlotte, you represent innocent intervention, pure motivations. That's why you're being targeted for protection and education. And manipulation? Isabella asked pointedly. Sarah paused. Every side in a fight tries to use available tools. You have the power to influence public opinion, to make people care about faceless environmental statistics. Is that why the bear incident happened? Did someone arrange for Ferris to get hurt just to create a story? I don't know, Sarah admitted. The chemicals affect bear behavior, but the specific timing of that cub approaching the gear at that exact moment, it could be coincidence, or it could be something more calculated. They arrived at the hotel just as panic was setting in. Isabella's mother was on the phone with police. Her father was checking hospital emergency rooms, and Charlotte was crying in the lobby. Where have you been? Her mother rushed to embrace her, anger and relief battling in her voice. Before Isabella could respond, Detective Rodriguez appeared. Isabella Chase, we need to talk. Now. In a private conference room, surrounded by her parents, Charlotte's family, Detective Rodriguez, and a newly arrived federal agent, Isabella found herself at the center of an interrogation. You received a threatening message, Rodriguez began. You left protective custody. Where did you go? Isabella took a deep breath. She could lie. She could claim she was scared, confused, just went for a walk. But Sarah's words echoed in her mind, about being an untainted witness. I went to meet Sarah Thompson at the old lumber mill. She wanted to show me evidence about the environmental crimes. The federal agent leaned forward. Did she give you any documents, photos, hard drives? Number. She just showed me charts and explained things. Did she mention any specific names? People inside Whitmore's organization who might be helping her? Isabella hesitated. She didn't want to get anyone in trouble, but she also knew lying to federal agents was serious. She mentioned there are good people inside Whitmore, and she said something about Thomas Whitmore having a daughter who was adopted, someone who might be in town. The room went deadly quiet. The federal agent and Detective Rodriguez exchanged meaningful glances. We found birth records yesterday, Rodriguez admitted. We've been investigating the same angle, but the adoption records were sealed by court order. There's more, Isabella continued. She retrieved the photo from her pocket. Thomas Whitmore was at the fair that night. Someone's been photographing everything. As the adults examined the photo and discussed its implications, Isabella's mind wandered. She thought about Ferris, recovering his strength at the sanctuary. She thought about the lumber mill's toxic legacy. She thought about all the people playing elaborate games with truth and justice. But mostly, she thought about innocence, both her own and the bear cubs. They had become pawns in a much larger game. The question was, could they find their way out while staying true to the simple compassion that had started everything? The federal agent's next words shattered her contemplation. Isabella, based on what you've told us, and based on evidence we've gathered, we believe there's going to be another incident, soon. Someone is positioning for a big reveal, possibly at the Harvest Festival next week. What kind of incident? We don't know. But we believe more wildlife might be at risk, and this time it might be intentional. Someone might be planning to prove their point in the most dramatic way possible. Fear crept up Isabella's spine. The Harvest Festival was Willowbrook's biggest event of the year. Thousands of people, hundreds of food vendors, animals from multiple states as part of a traveling zoo exhibit. If someone wanted to demonstrate the reach of the environmental crisis, it would be the perfect stage. "We need your help," the federal agent continued. "We need you and Charlotte to be our eyes and ears, to notice things adults might miss, to continue being the voices of compassion that cut through political noise." Isabella looked at Charlotte, who despite her young age seemed to understand the weight of the request. They had saved one bear cub. Now they were being asked to help prevent a potential environmental disaster. "Will you help us?" Rodriguez asked gently. Isabella thought of Ferris, learning to run on 3 legs. She thought of all the other animals suffering from human carelessness. She thought of the mysterious daughter of Thomas Whitmore, perhaps driven by guilt or revenge. "Yes," she said firmly. "We'll help." Charlotte nodded beside her. "We'll help the animals." But as the meeting broke up and plans were made for increased security and preparation for the festival, Isabella couldn't shake a feeling of dread. They were being pulled deeper into something that had started with a simple act of kindness, and she had a growing suspicion that the worst was yet to come. That night, unable to sleep again, Isabella snuck into the bathroom and called the number Sarah had given her. It rang once before being answered. "Isabella? Is everything okay?" The federal agents know about the adoption, about Whitmore's daughter. Good, it's time everyone knew. "But Isabella, listen carefully. There's something else I didn't tell you, something about the night at the fair." "What?" "The maintenance worker in the photograph. My nephew David. He found something in the Ferris wheel maintenance records. Someone had scheduled a special inspection for that exact night. Someone requested specific work on the gearing system. Who? We don't know yet. But the work order was signed by someone with override authority, someone above the regular maintenance crew." Isabella's mind raced. The fair manager? Higher than that. The permit listed emergency safety inspection as the reason, but Ferris wheels don't get surprise safety inspections at night during operating hours. So, someone knew the gears would be exposed? More than that. Someone may have known the bears were in the area. The timing was too perfect. After ending the call, Isabella paced the hotel bathroom. Someone had orchestrated the bear incident, but for what purpose? To expose environmental crimes? To frame the fair? To create martyrs out of 2 curious children? A new text message lit up her phone. "The truth about that night dies with the past. Ask your mother about the summer of 1995. Some secrets are buried deep. A friend." Isabella stared at the cryptic message. "Ayrete torlayrete tonnuche einde?" That would be the year before she was born. What could have happened then, that relates to now. Unable to contain her curiosity, she slipped back to the main room where her parents had finally fallen asleep on the pull-out sofa. Her mother's purse sat on the desk. Inside was her mother's phone. Isabella knew her mother's passcode. Her parents had old-fashioned values about family members knowing how to reach each other. She found the photo app and scrolled back through years of family pictures. Nothing from 1995. Nothing from 1996. In fact, their oldest digital photos were from 2002. Frustrated, Isabella was about to give up when she noticed a physical photo album in her mother's suitcase. She'd packed it for the hotel stay, a family comfort item. The album held older pictures, birthday parties, school events, family trips. But tucked in the back, almost hidden, was a newspaper clipping from 1995. The headline read, "Local woman saves baby eagles from illegal logging operation." Isabella's heart stopped. The woman in the photograph was her mother, 23 years old, holding 2 eagle chicks. The article described how she discovered poachers stealing eagle eggs and babies to sell on the black market. Her testimony had led to arrests and a major investigation into wildlife trafficking. The article also mentioned that the logging company involved had been a subsidiary of Whitmore Enterprises. Isabella sank onto the bathroom floor, mind reeling. Her mother had fought against Whitmore before, had won. Was that why they were being targeted now? Was this about more than just environmental crimes and bear cubs? She studied the photo more closely. Behind her mother in the image, partially obscured by trees, stood a man watching the scene. A man whose face Isabella now recognized, Harold Thompson. He had been there when her mother saved the eagles, years before the lumber mill contamination, years before Ferris got trapped. The connections were too many, too deep. Her family was part of this story in ways she'd never imagined. A soft knock made her jump. "Isabella, honey, you've been in there a while. Is everything okay?" Her mother's concerned voice cut through her revelations. Isabella quickly returned the album to the suitcase and flushed the toilet for cover. "Fine, Mom, just couldn't sleep." As she returned to her makeshift bed on the hotel room floor, Isabella's mind whirled with questions. Tomorrow, she would confront her mother about 1995. Tomorrow, she would dig deeper into the connections between their family and the Whitmores. Tomorrow, she would try to understand if everything that had happened at the fair was destiny or design. But for now, she closed her eyes and tried to believe that sometimes, just sometimes, 2 children could save a bear cub simply because it was the right thing to do. Even if "simply" had become the most complicated word in her vocabulary. As dawn painted the hotel window shades in soft gray, Isabella finally drifted to sleep, unaware that across town, in a climate-controlled vault beneath Whitmore Enterprises headquarters, someone was reviewing their own collection of photographs. Pictures spanning decades. Pictures that told a different story about the night at the fair. Pictures that would change everything when the right person finally saw them. Epilogue. 6 months later, Isabella stood at the edge of the newly designated Willowbrook Wildlife Sanctuary. The sign, freshly painted, gleamed in the afternoon sunlight. Dedicated to Isabella Chase and Charlotte Bennett, whose compassion started a movement. Behind her, Ferris explored his new home. The bear cub, now much larger, still favored his injured paw, but he moved with confidence, adapting to a life that had been forever changed by a single night at the fair. The environmental cleanup had begun. Whitmore Enterprises had been found guilty of decades of chemical dumping. Thomas Whitmore himself faced prison time for environmental crimes, fraud, and obstruction of justice. The mysterious whistleblower had eventually come forward, a longtime executive assistant who had quietly documented Whitmore's activities for 20 years. And Isabella's mother had finally shared the truth about 1995. Her conservation work had put her directly in Whitmore's crosshairs decades ago. She'd testified against his company's logging practices, which had threatened endangered species. After that, she'd been blacklisted in environmental circles, Whitmore's influence reaching far and wide. He never forgot, her mother had explained. He kept tabs on everyone who ever stood against him. When you helped that bear cub, it wasn't just random, it was another Chase woman disrupting his plans. The revelation that Whitmore had been monitoring her family for decades should have terrified Isabella. Instead, it filled her with pride. Her mother had stood for what was right. She had done the same. Some legacies were worth inheriting. Charlotte joined Isabella at the sanctuary's edge, her arm now healed. At 7 years old, she'd become remarkably articulate about environmental issues. She spoke at schools, educating other children about wildlife protection. "Do you think Ferris remembers us?" Charlotte asked, watching the bear explore a fallen log. "I like to think he does," Isabella replied. "Not as specific people, but as the moment when everything changed. When he realized not all humans are dangerous." Dr. Martinez approached from the observation platform, clipboard in hand. "He's adapting beautifully," the veterinarian reported. "His rehabilitation is a model for other wildlife affected by the chemicals." "And the other animals?" Isabella asked. "Improving. The cleanup will take years, but we're already seeing positive changes in the ecosystem. The contaminant levels are dropping month by month." The mystery of Thomas Whitmore's adopted daughter had been solved during the trial. Sarah Thompson's nephew, David, had discovered through genetic testing that he carried Whitmore's DNA. His mother, Sarah's sister, had been the baby given up for adoption all those years ago. The revelation explained his obsession with documenting Whitmore's crimes. "I always knew there was something personal driving me," he'd said at the press conference. "Now I understand it was in my blood." The story of Isabella, Charlotte, and Ferris had spread far beyond Willowbrook. A documentary team was filming the sanctuary's progress. Environmental groups used their image in educational materials. Politicians cited them in speeches about youth activism. But for Isabella, the most important outcome wasn't fame or policy change or even justice. It was standing here, watching Ferris climb trees and forage for berries in a safe environment. It was knowing that one small act of compassion had revealed a web of corruption and cruelty, and had begun to heal it. "We should go," Isabella's father called from the parking area. "You've got that interview with the National Science magazine in an hour." Isabella nodded. Her new life as an environmental advocate kept her busy. But she never forgot where it all started, with a bear cub's cry and 2 children who refused to ignore it. As they turned to leave, Ferris paused in his exploration. He lifted his head, seeming to look directly at Isabella and Charlotte. For a moment, just a moment, there was recognition in his dark eyes. Then he continued on his way, disappearing into the protected forest that would be his home for years to come. Isabella smiled as she walked back to her parents' car. The story that had begun with a trapped bear cub now had no real ending, just a continuing journey of healing for both the animals and the humans whose lives had become so unexpectedly intertwined. And though she was too young to fully understand it yet, Isabella had learned perhaps the most important lesson of all, that compassion, once ignited, can spark changes that reach far beyond what anyone could imagine. Even a bear cub trapped in a Ferris wheel gear could change the world.